Thank you so very, very much. Welcome to this moment in time. I am Gail Holloman, the Executive Director of the Fulton County Library System. Thank you to our author and our moderator, about whom you'll hear more later, for coming to be with us so that we can discuss this monumental book. We are so excited about today's author, visit, and book talk. It is the third one of our annual One Book, One Read series, and is sponsored by our wonderful Atlanta Fulton Public Library Foundation. The members of that board have done a tremendous job to bring us to this point, not only with this program, but other signature programs. At this time, I would like to invite our commissioners who are with us to come up and say a few words, starting with Commissioner Bob Ellis.
I am so thankful to be here. I'm here with my wife, Jennifer. Jennifer's in about 22 book clubs, and I know this is one of the favorite books that many of her book clubs have read, so she's super excited to be here, as am I. And we just hope that this is a great day for you all to just fellowship with one another, enjoy this discussion, and enjoy the beauty of the Fulton County Library System, which I think is the best library system, certainly in the state and perhaps in the country. And a big part of that is based upon the leadership of this lady right here. So I want to give her a hand.
Thank you, Commissioner Ellis. As I always tell people, it isn't me, it's the staff. They do a tremendous work every single day. Also, we have with us representing Commissioner Bridget Thorne. We have with us Ms. Gracie Hogg. Would you come up?
Hi, everybody. My name's Gracie. I work for Commissioner Thorne. It's my first time being in Fulton County Library. It's beautiful. I just started working for her about 6 months ago, so really excited to meet all these people, and I'm excited to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gracie. We appreciate it very much. We also have with us today the chairperson of our Library Trustee Board, Mrs. Priscilla Borders. Mrs. Borders.
Good morning, everyone. I like to see so many beautiful faces here. This is the third book club reading, well, the third One Book, One Read. And I am so excited for this opportunity to extend greetings on behalf of the Board of Trustees, but please know there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes, not only from the executive director and her staff, but with partnership with the foundation, and we constantly are updated with everything that's going on. So again, welcome and thank you for participating in the wonderful offerings here at the Fulton County Library System, which is the largest library system in the state of Georgia, and we're working really, really hard to keep it where it is and making sure that we move forward with the momentum that we already have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Borders. We have joining us Commissioner Dana Barrett. Please come up. Come on. How you doing? It's so good to see you.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm a minute late. Welcome. I know everybody is welcoming you, but I'll add my welcome. I am Commissioner Dana Barrett. I am a huge book lover and book club participant and organizer. I used to own a bookstore back in the day. This is a fantastic book, so I'm so excited that we're all here to talk about it. And yeah, just welcome to everything Fulton County Libraries. Enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If any of the other commissioners and others come up, we'll let you know. At this time, we will hear from someone who is very, very welcome and has been a great asset to us. And she is the Executive Director of the Atlanta Fulton Public Library Foundation, Ms. Erin Dreiling. Erin.
Awesome, thank you. I will keep it brief because I know we have an amazing program to get to. But so I'm Erin Dreiling. I am the Executive Director of the Atlanta Fulton Public Library Foundation. We are a nonprofit organization that advocates for and fundraises for our incredible library system. So we are a mechanism for corporations, foundations, and individuals like you to invest in our libraries. So I do want to take a moment. Several of my board members are here. If you are on the board of the Atlanta Fulton Public Library Foundation, will you just wave or stand up? Yes. Thank you so much. Those volunteers share their time and expertise with us, and we're so grateful. And if any of you are donors of the Library Foundation, I just want to say thank you as well. It's because of you that we are able to partner with the library on amazing programs like this that bring our community together, get neighbors talking and reading the same book. There is information about us in the program, and every gift matters. If you're so inclined, there's a QR code to make a gift. But again, thank you, and thank you to the amazing staff of the library who work so hard to put programs like this on every day. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. We can't thank the foundation enough. It's amazing, the work that they do. At this time, I want to make you aware that, as is true with every occasion, that it takes a person to organize it, to get it together, to pull it together, and we have such a person with us. Her name is Taryn Gilliam. She's our branch group administrator and also system-wide adult services coordinator. So she has worked with her team and made this event happen now for 3 years, and we're very excited about today's event. So at this time, Taryn will lead us through the rest of the program. Taryn Gilliam.
Hello, everyone. And as Ms. Holloman stated, I am one of 4 branch group administrators for the library system, and I'm excited to see everyone here today. And we hope that you enjoy yourself. And a lot of the things that I was going to say has already been said, but what I'll do is we'll jump right into our book discussion program, because it is my pleasure today to introduce to you our moderator, and her name is Monica Kaufman Pearson. Monica Pearson is the first woman and first minority to anchor the Daily Evening News in Atlanta, Georgia, where she worked for 37 years at WSB-TV and 4 years for KISS 104.1 Radio, hosting the Monica Pearson Show. Monica now writes and produces an hour-long personality interview show, Monica Pearson 101, on Peachtree TV. She also is a contributor to the AJC, writing a once-a-month column, A Monica Moment, hosting a new streaming program on AJC.com, featuring personality interviews and hosting a podcast. During her over 50 years in newspaper, public relations, radio, and television, she has won 33 Southern Regional and Local Emmy Awards for reporting, anchoring in her former celebrity interview shows, Close-Ups. Monica calls retirement rewirement, and now is a voice-over artist, public speaker, MC, and spokesperson. Monica is a native of Louisville, Kentucky, with a BA from the University of Louisville and an MA from the University of Georgia. She graduated magna cum laude at the age of 67. She is married to John E. Pearson Sr. and has a daughter and bonus son. So it is my pleasure. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Monica Pearson.
Thank you, Taryn. Good morning. Okay, we got to do this right. Okay. Well, our author today is Nikki Erlick, originally from Rye, New York. She now lives on the left coast, known as Los Angeles, and her first novel is The Measure. And it has measured up to a must-read, and a lot of people have read it. It was on the New York Times bestseller list, selected as a read with Jenna Book Club, pick on the Today Show with Jenna Bush Hager. Barnes & Noble selected it as a Discover pick. It's been translated to at least 12 languages. Yes. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this was not beginner's luck, but the culmination of a lifetime of writing. Now, when I spoke with Nikki on the phone to prepare for this event, she told me that she used to write a lot as a child, short stories and poems, but she emphasized for herself. When I particularly asked, well, can you bring a poem with you to read? And I could see her blushing through the phone. But the writing bug did bite her. She studied comparative literature at Harvard University, where she was also the editor of the newspaper, the Harvard Crimson. After graduating summa cum laude in 2016, she earned her master's degree in global thought from Columbia University in 2017. Now, since then, she's been a travel writer, visiting over a dozen countries. She's also been a ghostwriter for professionals, from CEOs to academics. Today, she is with us to talk about her book, The Measure. Please welcome Nikki Erlick. So, Nikki, there's your microphone. So I got to know, just for my interest, how many of you have actually read the book? Great. So that makes it easy for me. I love the premise of the book. The measure of your life lies within this little box that shows up on your front doorstep. So, Nikki, the first question I've got to ask you was, what made you come up with this idea? What happened in your life that made you, as a young woman, look at this?
A box arrived on my doorstep. What is this?
Did you open it?
No, I think it's really hard to pinpoint like what was the the light bulb moment.
The genesis.
Yeah, it was definitely back in 2018. I was working as a travel writer at the time, and I knew that at some point writing a novel was like my dream. I didn't know when it would happen, if it would happen, but that was always the goal. And I found myself really fascinated by kind of the ancient Greek mythology around fate and the big questions that I think we all wonder about at some point in our lives, like how much control do I actually have? How much power do I have over what happens? My destiny. Why do some people have one fate and some people have another fate in this book? Why is it, someone gets a short string and someone gets a long string? The questions that don't have answers. But the ancient Greeks tried to answer them by believing in this concept of the three fates who would weave these threads of life on their spindle and kind of determine the amount of time that every human being received. And so my thought for a book was just, what if these strings were real? And what if I gave them to everybody? What would happen to us as individuals? What would happen on a bigger kind of community level to the world? And because I was in that sort of Greek mythology headspace, I thought I'm going to put the strings in a Pandora's box for each person.
When we talked, we were talking about boxes, because when I was telling my husband about this, he says, "Oh, so she's thinking out of the box, wink, wink." And you said you have to be careful because of all the box puns.
The box puns, the string puns, and at some point when I was brainstorming titles for the book, because this was the first title that I ever thought of, The Measure, and then when the book was about to be published, I was like, oh, should I think of other titles? And all I could think of was out of the box, string theory. I think just things that just did not, they weren't working. But people often ask me for writing the book and how there were so many different characters. They're like, did you have strings on a board connecting all of them, like a murder board kind of thing? And I just can't escape boxes and strings now in my life.
I know what you mean. We will not do any more box or string puns during this interview. But what I would like to know is the process. When you decided that you wanted to look at this theme, how did you go about doing it? How much research was involved?
Luckily, the premise is obviously very just kind of from my imagination, and I think one of the first questions was, do I set it in present day or do I set it in some sort of future, more of a kind of traditional dystopian future novel? And I thought, no, I want to set it in the present. I want it to be a really recognizable world as our world, so that readers can kind of put themselves in the story more easily by seeing I recognize what that world looks like. It's my world, but these boxes are just here. And I can kind of more empathize with the characters that way. But the research came more in the character development, and once I decided that I was going to have many characters, which was not my initial plan for the book, but the characters kind of kept appearing. And then I had to, obviously do some research, what's it like to be at a military academy, an ER doctor, to be in the Army, all these sort of other jobs that are obviously not my job. And that was sort of the fun part of getting to kind of step into, other people's lives.
Well, you started this project before the pandemic, before COVID. How did COVID affect the book?
Yeah. Yes, the idea for the book was back in 2018, but the bulk of what's in the book now was written in 2020. From a sort of a practical standpoint, I had a job up until 2020, and then when I was a travel writer, and then when the pandemic hit, being a travel writer was not sort of the best job, and so I got let go pretty early on, and so then I all of a sudden had a lot of free time to write this book, which at the time I thought was like this huge failure, huge kind of setback. Like I lost my job, I don't know where my career is going, I don't know what's happening now. I had to, I moved back in with my parents because I couldn't afford my rent, and we were all in lockdown together. And so it was just me kind of in the attic 12 hours a day writing this book during a long stretch of time. But I also realized I was writing this story about, a very mysterious global crisis that kind of hits the world all at once, and then all of a sudden was living in, a very parallel situation. And so I could kind of use what was happening right outside my window to inform how the world might react to what was happening in this book. And it became a chance to kind of, make the story, I think, feel hopefully more realistic and authentic, because it was somewhat being inspired by the way that we were really reacting to a very similar kind of crisis.
You wrote in the book that your mother was your first editor, and also, I don't want to say most difficult, but she was the most detailed editor. What's her background so that you would trust her to edit what you were writing?
She's a great reader, and she also studied English, and I also just know that she's going to be honest with me, because I think she didn't want me to embarrass myself by sending something around to people that was bad, hopefully. But I really trust her kind of her taste, and her ability to to be honest with me, and so that if she told me enough times that something was bad, then by the time she told me something was good, I would believe it, which was nice.
What were the challenges in writing the book? You just said if something was bad, then you finally would read. What were the challenges?
I think there were sort of two levels of challenges. The first was just the kind of mental, psychological challenge of writing a book and kind of quieting the voices in my head that were saying, like, you can't do this, this isn't good, who cares what you have to say, like, why do you get to write this book? Just all that kind of like, the anxiety, the sort of the self-esteem questions that come in when you're trying to pursue something that, is a dream. It's something that I wanted this so badly. And so in my head, it's like, well, what if it doesn't happen? What if it's never going to happen? And so on the one hand, I was just kind of blocking all of that out, which is hard. And then just on a purely kind of writing level, I realized I had to tell this story from a lot of different perspectives, because it was something that was happening to the whole world at once. It was something that everybody would react to differently. And so I wanted to show enough of a variety of people's kind of different reactions. And so then I was like, well, it's keeping all the characters straight, finding ways for them to kind of interact and interweave was a challenge as well. And for me, it was like, I feel like I knew the beginning and the end of the book, but I didn't know the middle. And so I was like, how am I getting to where I want to go? And that's what took several years to figure out.
You did an excellent job with it. So what is the message that you hoped people would take, or should I say messages, you were sending in the book?
Oh, gosh, I think, certainly I think it is the kind of book that people are going to come to it from, from whatever space they're coming from, and they'll take different things from the book based on the kind of the context that they're arriving at the book. But, I would like it to be a story about how kind of the things that unite all of us as humans are so much greater and deeper than the things that divide us. In this book, the string has kind of become an analogy for all of the many different ways that we tend to kind of label ourselves and divide ourselves and succumb to more sort of selfish and, prejudicial and discriminatory tendencies as people that we've always done. But what is uniting all the people in this book is that they all have a string, and that's what unites all of us as people too. We're all, we all share the same essential experience of being human, of being here together on this earth for a limited amount of time. And I like to think that even though we do have a tendency to kind of behave badly as people, that that love and empathy and compassion will win out in the end. Certainly that's my hope, and that's sort of what happens in this book.
So now I'm going into details. Why the age 22 for receiving the box?
That was definitely one of the hard choices in the beginning of writing the book. I was like, okay, boxes are arriving. I didn't want them to necessarily arrive when you were born, because in that case it would be sort of someone's parents perhaps deciding, am I going to open this box for my child that was just born? And I want it to be a decision that you make for yourself as kind of an individual adult. And my initial thought was like 18, 21. But then I was like, those are just important years here in the US where you get certain rights, and these strings are, above that. They're kind of a, mysterious global force, and so they shouldn't kind of abide by like the voting age in America. And so for some reason the age 22 just kind of came to me as this age that feels like, hopefully you're beginning to be mature enough to think through these decisions, but you're still young enough that you kind of haven't yet necessarily put yourself on a path in life, and perhaps whatever you see or don't see in this box could inform that path, and so you still have the opportunity to really kind of make big changes.
Your major for your master's, global thought. How does that tie into this book? Because for me, I kind of see it, but I want you to explain it. How many of you have heard of a major of global thought? So would you explain to them how that was my reaction too, y'all. I had to look it up. So explain that major, why you did it, and how it ties into the book.
Yeah, it was a brand new program when I did it, which I think it was also part of the appeal, that I wanted to be like on the ground floor of something that was still being shaped by the students. I had studied a lot of foreign languages growing up, and so that was always something that appealed to me, just kind of stepping outside of my own, my own language, my own perspective, and thinking about the world beyond. And one of the things we really emphasized in the Global Thought program was just the kind of total interconnectedness of the world nowadays. It's obviously technology has allowed that, transportation, social media in general, like we're so connected at all times now. And that was really helpful for me in this book, to just think about the ways that something like this would happen, and it's happening everywhere. And so it's not just like what happens in New York, which is where most of the book is set. It's thinking about what's happening in other countries right now, and how are we maybe working together and informing each other. And a lot of that was informed by the pandemic too, where the race to create vaccines was countries collaborating in that moment. And so for me, the reminder of, I'm writing this book, it is mostly set in America because that's where I live, that's kind of the culture that I know the best, but just kind of keep peppering in sort of reminders that other countries are maybe behaving differently than we are here. And can we learn from that? Do we not want to behave that way? Do we maybe want to behave more that way? And the fact that, no one in this book is experiencing this in isolation, the way that kind of nobody nowadays experiences anything in isolation.
You mentioned that in the book that I think in China they collected everybody's box. And then in North Korea, the boxes.
It's been a while since I've read this book that I wrote myself, and so it's like I can't quite remember the specific.
I can't remember which one, but in one of them they collected all the boxes, and in the other everyone had to tell what was in their box.
So either nobody could open or everybody had to open and kind of report it to the government. Yeah.
So that to me was also interesting, that you threw in politics, not just one of the protagonists in this was a politician running for president. So why did you pull the political aspect into this, particularly because he decides to have a program called STAR, where anyone who works for the government or is in the military has to tell the government how long their string is. So why was that important?
I think when I first started writing the book, it didn't really cross my mind to kind of have these political elements in the story. I thought, this is a story about just sort of what it's like to be human, to know that our time here is limited. And initially what interested me most were like the love stories, and kind of what would happen if you're, in love with someone, planning a future with someone, and you find out that you have, very different kind of lifespans expected. What do you do? that was what I started writing first. And it was really writing more during the pandemic that then I realized we have a way of doing things here that even something that is not inherently political can become very quickly politicized. And so I thought there's no way I can ignore that aspect of this story. We have to get into it. And so the politician character kind of came in, the idea of a presidential election as the timeline came in as a way of exploring, how these strings could maybe be used as a kind of a divisive force in politics as well as a unifying force, how kind of power can be corrupting and how these can be used in a sort of corrupted way in the story. And as I was in that mindset, then I was thinking like, yeah, what would the military do? How would they respond if they have this way of knowing how long someone's going to live? I don't know if they could, I don't know if any of us could resist kind of being able to use that to, hopefully with good intentions, try to kind of save lives. But all these sort of the political layers, the bigger sort of societal layers of the story, they were not there originally, which is kind of what that was part of the sort of wild journey of writing the book over those couple of years and letting the story really evolve and take me in different directions I didn't expect.
One area that is really evident is the discrimination that comes up in the book against those people who have short strings. And you dealt with that explicitly. So I had a friend who read this book and said it was also applicable to the LGBTQ community. Were you thinking about that when you wrote it?
I was thinking of a lot of different communities when I wrote it. I didn't intend for the people with short strings to necessarily be a specific parallel for a specific group, but absolutely the military storyline, the idea of not being able to serve openly if you have a short string. That storyline was inspired by the history of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and sort of the LGBTQ community in the military. The concept that sort of short stringers almost become kind of profiled, and these assumptions that maybe they're could become domestic terrorists, like that all of that is obviously drawing off of histories of racial profiling here, and I wanted it to I wanted it to feel realistic, to feel like even though it's unfortunate and very bad the way that sort of it takes this dark turn, I wanted it to feel like reflective of the way that we behave in the real world, and but also to show towards the end that maybe we don't have to keep behaving that way, maybe we don't have to repeat the mistakes of history, and there is a chance for perhaps these strings to be a new start for the world, and it's hinted at in the end, even though I didn't want to go so far as to say that all of a sudden everything is great, because we haven't quite yet seen that in our world.
Well, I thought it was interesting that in the book near the end, it's to the point where teenagers who have grown up seeing their parents with the strings and their grandparents with the strings, there's even a television shows about the strings. It made me think again about COVID, how you just accept it and learn to live with it. Was that the plan of the book?
Yeah, I was writing it. I finished writing in 2021, and so we were still quite deep in the pandemic at that time. We knew the book was going to come out at some point in 2022, but honestly, I had no idea what the world was going to look like in 2022 because it had just changed so much in the last few years. But at that time, we were already starting to kind of use phrases like the new normal and this idea of just kind of humans are so adaptable. We do eventually adapt and adjust. And so at the end of the book, we do start to see like getting the boxes is just the new normal. This is just how, we've adapted now. This is life. And because of writing it during a really dark time, during 2020 and 2021, my only real thought was I just have to end this book on a note of hope. And I'm hoping that in 2022, it'll be brighter days when this book comes out, and and nobody knows, but all we have is hope.
There's a little bit of music mentioned in the book, and que sera, sera, what will be, whatever will be, will be. I thought you would be too young to know that song.
I have my grandparents to thank for singing it.
And that brings up another point. You dedicated the book to your grandparents. Why?
They're the ones who taught me how to read when I was younger. My grandparents were both retired educators, a school superintendent and teacher. And so they, instilled that. I became like their new student after they retired. So that, so they really instilled that love of kind of learning and reading in me. And my grandfather was the one who was always ever since maybe I was in high school. He's like, "When are you gonna write that book?" And I was like, "What is that book? Do you know about the book? Like, do you have the idea? Will you give it to me?" And he's like, "When are you gonna write the book? When are you gonna write the book?" And so I got very lucky that he was around, and I got to give him the book and say, "Here it is. I did it."
And what was his reaction?
He was very proud, very happy. Yeah, he read an early version. I didn't make him wait until the hardcover came out.
So when the hardcover came out, and the next thing you know, you're on the bestsellers list, your reaction?
Tears, lots of tears. I didn't think there were going to be tears, and then I went to tell my grandparents, and then the tears came. But I mean, so much gratitude too for like the fact that I wrote this book kind of in total isolation. The only people who really read it before it was like out trying to get published were my mom and my sister. And so when I sent it off to finally get an agent or to try to get a publisher, there was a quick moment where I was like, did I just write the wackiest thing in the world? And nobody told me, and no one's going to believe it. No one's going to buy into it. And so the fact that then, I just met the right people at the right time who were willing to take a chance on someone who had never published a piece of, fiction before. I'm just so grateful that they took that chance on me, and then that people actually went out and bought the book.
Well, some people have described it as literary fiction, but others describe it as a new form of science fiction. How do you describe it?
Yeah, I've seen it on like many, many different shelves in bookshops, which is nice. That it's, I've seen science fiction, I've seen fantasy, magical realism, literary fiction, as you said. I feel like I tend to use the term speculative fiction because quite literally I was speculating as to sort of how things might play out if this were the case. Because certainly I was inspired by kind of more true sci-fi, true kind of dystopian literature, when you think of things like The Handmaid's Tale and stuff. But to me, like, that's not quite this book. And, it's not quite as dark. It's not set in the future. And so to me, I was like, speculative fiction is what I call it, but I will let anybody call it whatever they want to call it.
As long as they buy it.
Or take it out for the library. But no, I think what's great about sort of the many different genre labels is the fact that I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, I normally don't read books like this, but a friend told me I should. Like, I normally don't read something that's not kind of totally realistic, that involves something supernatural, something magical. But I took a chance on this one, and I enjoyed it. And so I think that's really special, that it's kind of opening people up to maybe a genre that they didn't think they would like, and it's allowing people who normally read different genres to maybe have the conversation about the same book, and that's really cool.
Well, I also think what's fascinating about it, my mother used to say, you don't know when you were going to be born, and you don't know when you're going to die, because nobody came to stay. And in this book, people are having to deal with their time to go. So when people see you, and we're going to open it up to questions here, they've got to ask you the question, if you received a box, would you open it?
I don't think so.
Why not?
I say I don't think so because I really can't know for certain, but I would really try not to. I think I would not throw it away. I wouldn't like dump it in a river or somewhere where I could never get it again. I would immediately regret that probably. But I would like to keep it maybe somewhere in my house and just look at it every so often as kind of a reminder that, to live with purpose, to live with gratitude, to live kind of mindfully. Because even if I don't look at the string, I know there is a string. I know that I have one. I know that everyone I love has one. And so just, trying to live each day with a little bit of that knowledge to kind of not take any day for granted. But yeah, I would try to see if I could live that way without actually opening the box. But I don't know if I would have that strength.
What I loved about this, too, there were love stories in it. between Nina and Mara, the journalist. Is that you?
There's some bits of me sprinkled in there, yeah, but no one is me specifically.
Are there people you know who are profiled in here?
I think that would invite a level of chaos into my life that I did not. I don't want people I know reading the book and thinking, is this what she thinks of me? Is this me? So everyone is purposely kind of very, very, very fictional.
Well, let's talk about Nina, the journalist, who had the long string, and her partner had the short string, and they finally decide we're going to wed after much thought. How did you develop those two characters and their relationship?
Yeah, I think, there's sort of that saying that when you want to start out writing, you should write what you know. And I thought, I don't want to write about what I know. I want to write about what I don't know, which is obviously a lot of where this premise came from. And I want to write about what I want to know. And so writing a lot of Nina and Maura's relationship was me writing, how I'd want to think that I would react in that situation if I were them. I would, for someone like Maura who gets a short string, she doesn't just kind of like retreat to her bedroom and decide to, spend the next however many years, feeling sorry. She's like, I'm going to take this time and live with purpose and find an even better purpose and leave an impact on the world. And I'm still going to kind of pursue the things I want and the people I love. And to me, I'm like, that is how I really, really hope that I could face what she faces with that level of kind of courage and strength and grit. And I would like to think that, if I were in Nina's position, that my partner's string length wouldn't matter. If I love this person and I wanted to be with this person before the string, then why would I not want to still be with them now? And so that was me, that was me really, really hoping that is how I could behave as both of those characters, because I really kind of admire the way that they both behave.
And then there was Ben, the architect, who had the short string, whose girlfriend left him. He was not planning to open his box, and she said, well, I want to know, and told him.
I get a lot of comments about that character.
Yes.
Yeah. They're like, she's awful.
It's like, why should he put her in the book? She's a nosy lady, and then just deserted him, which she did. But
I'm like, do we not know at least one person who would maybe go behind someone's back and look in their box? I don't know.
The duplicity. Yeah. But then Ben gets with Amy, and Amy said, I'm not going to look in my box, and just put it aside. And I'm glad everybody's read the book because I don't want to give anything away. But then the both of them, they finally get married, and she never sees inside her box. Ben is diagnosed with cancer and is going to die. And then on their way back from the hospital, they're hit by a car, and both of them are killed. And then they learn that she also had the short string. But they also had 2 children. And that carries over to Nina becoming a parent.
Yeah, that was always the ending of the book for me. Like from the very beginning, when I first came up with these characters, and those 4 characters, the sort of the 2 couples that you mentioned, and 2 of them being linked as sisters. Those were the very first 4 characters that I came up with, and I was like, this is how I see the ending to their story, back in I guess 2018, and it never changed. That was really that was where I was writing towards the whole time. That's the one thing that just really felt right to me, even though I knew that it was, I knew that it was sad, but something about it just felt true, and that was the ending of the story. And of course, the fact that Amy never looks is, sort of that message to all of us, to the people like me especially, who are like love to plan, and I've got the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan. I want all of these things, and that sort of man plans and God laughs, right? That there is no way to plan, and so her story is kind of that message that no matter what we think is happening, probably something else is going to happen, and that is life, and being able to kind of take life as it comes is what we all have to learn how to do as humans.
And then the 2 who were interesting, who were roommates, that's Jack and Javier. I love the diversity, by the way, in your writing. You've got everybody thrown in there. even someone who's Hindu. But we'll talk about the religious aspect later. But I thought that it was interesting that Jack and Javier decided to exchange strings. Javier had the short one, but really wanted to be in the military, where Jack, from a family that believed very strongly in being in the military, really didn't want to have anything to do with it. So they exchanged strings. And I guess for me, the surprise was at the end that Javier dies in war. He always had the short string. He had written his parents telling them the truth, and then it becomes a big issue. Why?
Yeah, that storyline sort of was one of the most that sort of surprised me as well, because as I said, it wasn't something I was intending to necessarily write. And then I got into it and thought, how would the military respond to these strings? And so then I created this idea that you have to have a long string to serve. And then finally the idea came to me like, could people deceive? Could people? Obviously, you can't change your string. There's no cutting of the strings or anything like that. But you could sort of change the string that you're presenting to the world, perhaps, and kind of lie about the string that you have. And so that storyline came to me as an interesting idea, and that it would be two friends who, that it's the one who knows exactly what he wants to do and has a sense of purpose, who gets his time cut short, and the one who is kind of aimless and doesn't know what to do with his life and doesn't have that purpose, who's all of a sudden given, all of the time. And that they're just, they have these very opposite kind of personalities and trajectories. And of course they get the opposite strings. And so then what happens when they sort of take on each other's lives in a sense? I thought that was something that was sort of unplanned and was something that just kind of came as I was writing during the meandering. And I was sort of fascinated by this as a storyline and these two characters. And, as I consider their story to somewhat be a love story as well, that it's, there's many different types of love in this book, and they're an example of kind of friendship love, fraternal love, and that at the end, as you mentioned, that when it sort of comes to light that Javier did this and it becomes kind of a scandal, that's sort of Jack's moment of, he's been so aimless, he hasn't had any sense of purpose, and all of a sudden now he has purpose in kind of, in protecting his friend's legacy, and that kind of becomes an opportunity for him to sort of redeem himself from maybe some of the, not as great decisions he made throughout the book.
And to get back at his father. As quietly as it's told. A character that was small but that really stuck with me was Hank. Hank, had a short string. He was a surgeon. And then he ends up dying protecting Anthony Rollins, who was a creep. I didn't like him at all. I know you always got to have one bad guy in there, but the reality was he was discriminating against people with short strings. But Hank seemed to still be trying to deal with, yes, I have a short string, but I'm also saving people's lives while I'm serving as a surgeon. And then when he's killed, he becomes an organ donor. Now, how did that come about?
Yeah, he was a really, really great character to write. And a lot of people seem to pick him as their favorite character when I talk to readers, which is really interesting because, as you mentioned, he's not there for the whole book. He's an example for me of someone, again, who, he has a real sense of purpose. He does save lives. He is a surgeon, and then gets this short string. And it's an example of how, nobody in this book does anything that kind of like earns a string, that there are many really, really good people in the real world and in the book who, whose time is cut short, and people like Anthony who are not as good people who are given many, many years. And having him kind of be an organ donor then in the end was a choice to sort of honor the way he lived his life, that I think he would live that way in death as well, and to show that, his string is the length of his life, but it's so much longer than that because now his string has somehow become a part of this woman's string who, his organ is now living on and letting her live a longer life, and she has a long string because he had a short string. And it's this sort of way that we are all, connected in ways that we can't always see. And I personally really like to believe that. I like to sort of take comfort in that fact that, we're all touching each other's lives in some way, even when we can't kind of see it on the surface.
So, looking at your book now, thinking back on how you wrote it, I know you're working on another book, in the middle of doing another book. But looking back at your book, you know, all of us, after we finish something, we kind of review it and critique it. What would you change about the book?
Well, I
It's
guess
a little late, but I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
it's a little late.
Because, you know, we all have those
No, totally.
questions.
And I mean, I'm really, you know, I'm very nitpicky. I'm very kind of perfectionist when it comes to the book and just sort of everything. And so I made the choice, which is why I kind of stumbled on that one question you asked me, because the book came out in mid-2022, but in mid-2021, a whole year earlier, I was told by my editor that I couldn't make any more changes, that it was like, you know, going to production, it was going to be printed, it cannot be touched again. And then I said, well, then I'm never, ever going to look at it again. Because if I read a sentence now, I think I would be struck by like, oh, I hate that comma. Oh, I want to change that word. Oh, you know. And so I truly, I mean, now it's, gosh, you know, now it's late 2024. I haven't read the book since she told me I couldn't, I couldn't touch it again. And so I'm very, very worried that someone's always going to ask me a really specific question, and I can't remember. But and sometimes when people ask me to like read a passage, I'm like, do I have to? Like, I'm really trying not to. So it's hard for me to know what I would change, because I truly have not gone back, just because I know I'd be, as you said, so overwhelmed with that desire to critique it, and I would be waking up in the middle of every night like, oh, I should have done this. And so right now the book is as it is, because I refuse to indulge the thought.
You're a wise woman. You're a wise woman. Okay. What is next? We mentioned the book that you're working on now. Can you give us a hint of what it's about, or are you sworn to secrecy?
I don't know. I should ask someone if I'm sworn to secrecy, I suppose. But it's not a sequel, but it has a lot of similarities. It's also an ensemble story. Although I was told that 8 characters was a lot of characters for readers, so this next one only has 6. So, so maybe it'll be a little easier to follow. So it's 6 different kind of characters, and they come together. And the bulk of the book takes place over a cross-country road trip that was sort of inspired by a road trip that I took with my sister. And it's odd that it takes place over a road trip, because I hate driving. Like, I hate driving. And
You're a New Yorker.
right? My license just like sat gathering dust for many, many years until this road trip. But I think it has a lot of kind of similar emotional themes to this book, and so I'm hopeful that it will resonate with the people that this book resonated with. But I'm just lucky that I get to write another one. Like, that's, writing one book and getting it out there in the world is an incredible gift, and so the fact that I'm now getting to actually do this as a career is really remarkable.
But talk about the pressure when you come out of the gate and your first book is such a big hit.
I mean, I definitely am feeling pressure with this next book. Less about like, oh, how will it sell, and more just, will it resonate with people? Because with this book, what's been so incredible is that, the book has been out for 2 years now, and truly still every single day I get a message from a reader, either, on somehow they find my email, which is fine, or, they message me on Instagram, or they go through my publisher and I get forward. They find a way to send me a message, which is amazing. And so every single day for 2 years, I've gotten a message from a reader about, why this story resonated with them, what character's storyline, they kind of empathize with the most. And so the fact that it touched people that way is, it was so unexpected, such a huge honor. And so for me, really feeling like I want the next one to do that, I want it to do that as well. I want to kind of touch people in the same way, because that's why I did this. Like, I wrote a book because I love books, and they've moved me, and they've moved me to tears, and they've made me laugh, and they've made me think about things I never would have thought about before. And so, if my book is able to do that too, that's really incredible.
So after I finished reading this, I could visualize it. So tell me, is it going to be a movie or a TV series? Come on, give me the tea.
Hopefully, the answer is hopefully. The sort of option rights for a TV series were optioned by the production company founded by the Obamas. And so, yeah, that phone call is certainly a phone call I'll remember for all of my life. So hopefully, but that world is it's not my world. Mine is the world of books, and so I don't really know what's going on that side of things. But I trust that company. I trust their vision, and I think if it could come to the screen, that would be amazing. But it's not for me to decide.
Her sister is a screenwriter, so I'm already I'm claiming that your sister's going to be writing on this project, okay?
I don't know if she would want to. I think she likes to keep our stuff a little more separate.
But then she's younger, and younger sisters are like that.
That's true. That's true.
For me, an only child.
That's true.
Okay, so I'll answer the question that I know you're wondering. Would I open the box? No. And the reason is because of what Hattie said. None of us came to stay. So
maybe I should have had that as the inscription on the box instead of the measure.
So now it's your turn to ask questions of Nikki. I would ask, we're going to run the microphones up to you. And those of you who are down here on the floor, that'll be really easy for you to get to. So young lady over here has a question. And if you don't mind, could you please give us your names?
Yes.
Thank you.
I feel so privileged and so excited to be here because
you.
this is my exposure to this whole journey and incredible piece of work that you have put together.
Can you hold the mic a little
I'm
closer
sorry,
to your mouth, please?
because it
Thank
doesn't
you.
sound, I can't hear myself in the room even. Is this
Now it's working.
Oh, okay, then it wasn't close enough. But I feel so privileged, and so I came into this meeting with the lunch, and I met people, talked to people, all of whom had read the book, and I'm not one of them. But it has been so mind-expanding and so incredible, so mysterious, so well put together, so connected. But I want to get back to a question, Monica, you asked earlier about the box. And I know absolutely, and of course we've talked about it, there is no way in the world I would open a box where I had to decide. Because just the other day I said to somebody, I said, all the decisions we make in life are two things. We are born and we will die. I mean, I'm totally convinced about that. I don't have to think about it. And the only thing you can do in between is figure out how you're going to live that life. And people get so into ageism, but the only thing about age is some people were born before and some people are born later. And in between, all there is the time between birth and death. So back to the thing about the box. I get this mail, and we probably all get it about Lifeline, and they're always asking you to fill out this thing where you look at what kind of things may have existed in your life, your ancestry, as a predictor of what will happen to you. And I put that stuff in the trash so fast. I shred it. I know I don't want to know, because all that could do is to cause you to try to live your life now in a way that's responding to that, which you could never know, as you said, because a plane, a car wreck, and anything can come along and kill you or take your life, depending on how you feel about the afterlife. But it can change everything. So I could never want to know. I live my life fully and joyfully because this is the time I have. And I'm not even being philosophical. It's how I live and how I think. And I refuse to ever. I know I wouldn't open a box.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a gentleman right there, lady right there. Okay, in the black and white. Yes, you are.
All right. I would open the box. I'll start that. You are in a room full of people that you know love to read, librarians. So two-part question. One, were there, and as an ex-teacher, English teacher, were there teachers in your past that you'd like to do a shout out to that influence your writing? And secondly, talk about what we all experience now with banning books.
I don't think I could choose any specific teachers to call out right now, because truly, I was so lucky that I just had an incredible series of teachers all throughout my time. And not, I mean, certainly English teachers who kind of noticed that I, particularly love to read, and they would give me extra books outside of the syllabus. And a couple of those books are then the books that are mentioned in my story, like The Giver and Tuck Everlasting, these kind of books that were really important to me as a child that my teachers gave me. And obviously, as I mentioned, my grandparents were teachers, so they were my first ones. But kind of having this book come out has just been so special because I did like sort of a little book launch in my hometown, having not lived there for a while, and like all of my past teachers came. I think they like saw a note about it in the local newspaper. As far back as my third grade teacher came. I mean, it was just like truly, I was like so moved to tears by that event, and so just this, because obviously we as students remember all of our teachers because I only have a certain number of them, but the fact that you're like, no, teachers also remember all of their students, and there are so many of them. Oh my gosh. So that was really special for me because absolutely, I think, I don't know if I would have become a writer if I hadn't had enough people in my life who told me that it was possible, and who gave me the books to read, and who really nurtured that, and made me feel encouraged, made me feel capable. It's so special, and I don't think I thanked them probably when I was a student, and you really take it for granted, and you don't see it until you're older and looking back like, wow, I got here because of that. So I made sure I thanked my teachers in the acknowledgments of the books, so that they know that they were really the ones who brought me there. But yes, but I don't want to name anyone specifically because there's too many. Okay, and then book banning, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I feel the way a lot of authors feel. Reading changed my life, and from a very young age, and I do believe it's probably because I had access to many different books. I could just wander into the library both in my hometown and in my school, and I do believe that having that freedom to kind of pick up a book is so important, and especially books with perspectives that are different from your own, which are obviously the books that tend to be targeted the most. Because for me, reading is about empathy. You open a book and you're meeting a main character on the first page who is not you, and you're over the course of the book going to kind of root for them and understand them, and laugh with them and cry with them, and you really empathize with this person, and that's the power of reading. And I like to think that when you kind of put the book away and you return to your real world, you're kind of going to bring that curiosity and that open-mindedness and that compassion to the people around you in your life who may be different from you. Certainly that's a theme in this book. And so I think having the ability to read all different kinds of books with all different kinds of perspectives is incredibly important. And it was certainly important in my life growing up. And so I hope that students today will still be able to do that.
And I think it's important that parents be the translators on some books. I can remember my mother taking me to the library and sitting down with me and reading a book with me and explaining things that maybe I didn't understand.
Sure, of course, yeah.
So I think rather than banning, expand your mind.
Yeah, give people the chance to ask questions.
Yes.
Of their parents, of their teachers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, who's next? Oh, the gentleman right there, since the microphone is close to him. That's you in the shirt, kind of maroony shirt.
I guess so. Well, first I would say thank you. As a physician, I don't read a lot of books, but thanks to my wife being a voracious reader, we had the opportunity to read this, which was actually a great book.
Yes, thank you to your wife.
Yeah.
It's called marriage maintenance. You're a smart man.
There's a reason why she's the better half, and I recognize that. But one question that, or a theme that kind of came up in the book in a couple of places that you didn't expound on, was this concept of the quality of life versus your quantity of life. And I wanted to ask you the question about why, I know you could dive into this and make it like a 10,000-page book potentially, but why not follow that theme a little bit more about how do you live life, not just how long do you live life? Like specifically with like disability and again, living, being alive versus living.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely, if not explicitly stated, an aspect of the book for sure. The fact that, at some point it's discovered that people who get really long strings, it says nothing about, as you said, the quality of your life. Sometimes people get a long string and they think, well, now I can go commit a lot of crimes. And it's okay, well, then your long string is going to be spent entirely in prison. Or your long string is spent, in a coma because you took a crazy risk. And it is really, I think in the book, it's a lot of the characters coming to realize that that what they want to pursue is quality of life and not quantity of life. And of course it is a great blessing to have a very, very long life. But it doesn't guarantee happiness, and it doesn't guarantee a sense of purpose and love and meaningful relationships and connections. And so for I think the characters in the book, a lot of the journey is realizing, no matter how long my string is, as our friend here said, it's how you live in between the beginning and the end, and it's how you live your life. And for me, a big message of the book is that. In a lot of cases, it's the characters with the shorter strings who kind of leave like the greatest impact on the world, and that no matter the length of life, we all have the ability to leave a lasting legacy, to make a huge difference in our communities and our families, and you don't need a lot of time to kind of to be remembered well and to leave a true impact on the world.
And that brings up one of your characters who has a short string, is disabled in a wheelchair, and is working at the center helping people through therapy. Questions? Way over here. Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
Hello. I'm always curious who writers read. So can you name a few writers that you love, and specifically who inspired this book?
Yeah, I think a lot of, in terms of inspiring this book, it really goes back to a lot of the books that I read at a young age, as I mentioned, like The Giver and Tuck Everlasting, which are two of my favorites from growing up. When I started writing this book, I realized, there's a little bit of them in this book, even though I read them so many years ago. These sort of, Tuck Everlasting, of course, is about, if you could choose to live forever, would you? Which is, has similarities here. And I think really that is proof to me that kind of everything you read lives a little bit inside of you somewhere, and it'll come out in surprising ways. But my favorite writers to read right now, Ann Patchett is one of my favorites. I mean, she's very beloved, and I really just admire her career and kind of the many different stories she's been able to tell. I love all of her books. In terms of the kind of more sci-fi speculative genre like this, Ted Chiang, I think, is a really fascinating and very, very smart sci-fi short story writer who takes a lot of kind of similar big scientific questions or big philosophical questions at the center of his stories, and in that sense has some sort of parallels to this book as well. But I sort of discovered him as I was writing this book, and I'm very glad that I did.
Hi. Thank you for writing this book. It actually reminded me it could be a Black Mirror episode.
I've heard that too, which is so funny because I've never seen Black Mirror.
It's good. You should. So I just finished a grad program in nutrition where we learn a lot about the choices that we make and how that can affect our quality of life, but also just disease development from acute and chronic diseases that can affect, how much time that we have on this earth. When you were writing this book, how much did you grapple with trying to understand fate, but also, fate is gonna fate, but also the way that we can influence our string's length? Because even with Hank's situation of am I even influencing someone's string if they have a long string or short string? But then you had characters that were kind of testing the boundaries of the couple that, tried to commit suicide, or those that would go and try to, overdose on pills, but it didn't really work. So yeah, when developing these characters, did you grapple with that at all as far as what is fate? Do we even have any choice in it? And there's this unfairness of it all too.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of the first questions that I really had to come up with an answer to as well, which is, I created the idea of these strings, and then question number one is, can you change your string? And does seeing the string, as you said, impact then the way you behave, and does that then impact the length of the string? And so I had to decide pretty early on that these strings were going to be definite and sort of unchangeable, and that the string, it knows the way that you are going to respond to seeing it. And so they are these sort of all-knowing entities that can't be changed, because that's sort of how the world of the book had to work. And also, honestly, I feel like that is how our world works, where, as I said, bad things happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people. And certainly people in my community who have had shorter strings, there's nothing that they could have done or didn't do that would have sort of changed the length of that string. It's just, it's just the randomness of fate, and it's incredibly hard. It's incredibly hard to accept. It's one of the hardest things of living, I think, just accepting the randomness, accepting the fact that so many things are out of our control. And certainly I was writing this book during the pandemic, which felt like I had, none of us had any control at all in that time. And writing the book was partially my way of trying to come to terms with that. I don't know if I actually did, but coming to terms with the fact that all we can control is the way that we live and the way we treat other people, and the person that we choose to be. And so that's eventually what the characters in this book realize too. It's obviously there are things that we can do, nutrition being one of them, to improve our quality of life. But the main thing that you can control is just who you are and how you interact with, how you move about in the world. And that, to me, is sort of the most important thing that these characters learn, and that I've tried to accept as well.
Up there.
Hi. I want to tell you, your book is my number 2 favorite book in the entire world.
Oh. I mean, now you do have to say what's number 1, but thank you. That's very, very kind.
My number 1 is The Monsters We Defy. It's a very good book. And I want to thank you for it, because I can't read. And I can't read because I have dyslexia. And so I listen to books. And that is the most fascinating and most wonderful thing. I don't know the names of all the people who are the readers, but they were wonderful. And I have 3 members of my book club, and my niece, who's at the microphone, book club people I always talk about. She and I have a private book club among ourselves. And when I chose the book, your book, because of your cover, and it was beautiful, and it became the number 1 book between my niece and I. And so I thank you, because it brings us closer, and she came all the way from New Orleans because you're here today.
Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. Thank you. Well, and thank you for commenting on both the cover and the audiobook, neither of which I had anything to do with, which is, but I love them, but the incredible narrator, incredible cover designer, absolutely.
Have you ever listened to it? Have you ever listened to your book?
I've listened to snippets, but as I said, I can't really, I can't listen or read, but I have listened to snippets so I could get a sense of it. And Julia Whalen is the narrator. She's an incredible narrator, has a theater background, which I think is part of what makes an incredible book narrator. And I've had people ask me, like, would I want to narrate the audiobook of my book? And absolutely not. Oh my gosh. That's a tough job. I mean, they have to, they control like what they're eating and drinking during the hours that they're working, so that their, mouth sounds, I mean, no, I could never.
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, thank you so very much.
Thank you for coming from New Orleans. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
As a parent of a short stringer,
take your time.
my daughter Naomi, 10 years ago, 4 years old, the love of my life. My family and I, we were so happy to have her. And unfortunately, her string was cut short. But the impact that she's made on me, my family, my aunt, my 96-year-old grandfather loved my daughter so much. So thank you. If nobody says, I appreciate you as an author,
Oh. That's the power of your writing.
That's the power of stories in general. I really, really believe that. In places like this, libraries, book clubs, the power of just sharing books and sharing stories.
Okay, we have someone over here. Lady in the black and white. Could we take there we go. And then I'll come over here.
I was getting ready to make all my book club friends move. Thank you for, this was a great book. I was telling everybody because I read at work and listened.
At work?
Yeah, at work.
Okay, never mind.
On my lunch hour.
I caught that.
The boss is not listening right now.
On my lunch hour, I read and listened.
That's better.
And I bragged about how great the book was. I was telling them all about it. So my question is, did you decide before you wrote the book that you were not going to tell us what kind of Santa Claus situation? Everybody woke up with a box. And my other thought was, I love the reference to one of my favorite books, author E.B. White. I know it's very detailed. You may not remember that.
The quote, yes, the quote on the bench.
Quote.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. And I really loved Hank because I think he died trying to preserve or avoid short stringers being viewed as weird. And so I would not open my box. I know we were supposed to answer that maybe. But did you decide that you were not going to tell where these boxes came from when you wrote the book?
Yes. I also pretty early on decided that I would not, that wasn't for me the sort of the point, not the point of the story, but that wasn't what I was as interested in, I would say. Obviously the idea was inspired by, the sort of Greek mythology, the Pandora's box, the fates. But I decided I wanted to write a story about, human beings and what it is to, to be a person, to be alive. And that was more important to me and more interesting to me than kind of creating a new, creating a sort of fantasy, who's setting the boxes, how are they working. I think in the hands of a great sci-fi fantasy writer, that would be a phenomenal book. But for me, it was more about, okay, the strings exist. I don't want to get into where they're coming from. What I want to know is what we're going to do with them, how we're going to use them, what that then can illuminate about, how we live our lives already without these strings. And that sort of human side of the story was always the more intriguing for me than kind of the mystery elements of the book. Although I recognize that, I've had a not insignificant number of readers tell me that they were upset with with not getting, or I get a lot of, I both love it and I hate it that you didn't tell me. And I was like, oh, I think I can live with that, yeah.
Over here. There was a lady over here in this section. Well, you're kind of in between. See right there, right here, lady over here.
Hi. Thank you very much for coming, and this is an amazing program today. I appreciate the library doing this as well. My question is about process, your process. So you said that the pandemic kind of, through job loss and forced isolation, got this book going. Now that you're writing your second book, is your process changing? Do you have to do something overtly to get the book done? Are you also writing nonfiction and fiction at the same time?
Right now I'm really just focused on fiction. It takes all of my brain energy and my time. But it's definitely a different process now, and it is harder in the sense that I'm trying to balance writing and also living a life, whereas I wasn't able to do that during the bulk of 2020. But I think for me, it's I'm learning more about my process as I go, and I have so much admiration for the writers who they wake up at 4 a.m. They write from 4 to 6. They get the kids to school, then they write from 12 to, they have like the really specific schedule, and it's incredible. And I did it for a day and I couldn't do it. And the people who write, 500 words a day, 1,000 words a day, also, I maybe made 3 days in a row with that, and then I couldn't do it. And it's about sort of, for me, like, being patient, having sort of grace for myself on the bad days when it's just not working and I have terrible writer's block, and not forcing 1,000 bad words that I'm just going to have to delete anyway. And so it's, finding ways to still feel inspired even when the writing isn't happening. And so for me, that's like, going out on a walk, reading a book, listening to music, things that just sort of still, they're keeping me inspired, they're keeping me feeling creative, and even if I'm staring at my Word doc, like banging my head during the night.
So do you use Word? Or
Yes.
Word.
Old school Word. Yeah.
Old school Word.
Like 1997 version, maybe. It's always prompting me to like update it, and I'm like, go away.
And when things pop into your head, do you write it immediately or do you talk it into your phone?
I'll try to write it if I can. I have a very annoying, ideas tend to come to me right when I'm on the cusp of sleep in my bed. It's like the worst possible time because I'm like desperate to fall asleep, and then like a sentence pings in my head. And so I do keep my phone near my bed, and I'll grab it and I'll like dictate what I just said. Just like, I don't know, I think maybe that's, in my head I'm like, well, I'm not getting as exposed to the blue light or something, and I'll be able to fall back asleep if I just kind of talk. But yeah, I will. And then in the morning I'll wake up and be like, what is this?
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a couple more questions. Someone over here? Yes.
Yes. Hi. I really do appreciate works that have potential to change a life, that really transform the way one lives a life, and I think this book does that. I also, what it does for us is bring what's unconscious to the conscious level. It forces everyone who reads it to understand that there are these values that we hold that we might not be able to articulate, but that your story lives out, right? So the idea that length of life is more valuable than quality of life, or that we have value fundamentally, intrinsic value versus our value as producers or as products in the long term, right? And your book illustrates that beautifully. And there are many multiple themes emerging, and I thought to myself, okay, well, did she track these out? Like, okay, I want to touch on this and this and that, but they all naturally kind of emerge from the premise.
Yes,
right?
It was definitely more of an emergence than a,
right.
I'm trying to
Okay, so with this theme, high level, here comes down, funneling through this rainwater of these are the things that, these are the concepts that end up showing up when we set up this world.
Yes.
So did you outline? It kind of sounds like you're going to the place of structure.
Right.
No outline.
No outline. It just emerged. The world created the themes that end up coming up.
I think it was more the world sort of created the themes, or certainly the premise came, which was the world, and then my decision of whose stories to explore within that premise and within that world. At that point, then I am making the choices of these are the stories I want to tell, because I do, as you said, I want this to be a story about the intrinsic value in every human being, just for the sake of us, us being here as humans.
Right.
But no outline, which I came to regret later on.
I do want to just add this. I think that then is the hard homework for the readers to do, is to not just ask the question, would I open the box? But among all these choices that are presented in the book, what do I value? And what am I now willing to live by? Like, that's the homework, I think. If there is a homework assignment to be done for the reader, like really, like not just what's my bucket list, but also what are the values that I hold dear? do I believe I have intrinsic value? Do I believe that the other people around me have intrinsic value? Are they only worth what they can produce? And other questions that emerge out of this. So I think those are the really high level questions that come out of this, and I'm so grateful that you wrote it. Thank you.
So I hate to do this to the young man, but all the way to the top. We're going to take 2 more questions because I was supposed to stop us 15 minutes ago. But I am going, take your hiney all the way to the top. Thank you. I can get by with that kind of stuff. I'm 76 years old, so I'm allowed.
Hi. Thank you for giving us a little extra time. Okay, I really want to have this question answered because I was reading your book more recently, and in our book club, we have a couple members here, and I had just read about the attempted assassination when Eargate happened, and so I'm reading it backwards. I read your book and then saw that and was like, oh crap. You having the idea and written it and then watched that, I'm so curious, like, maybe in that scenario, but like in watching politics now, having imagined how people react, how is that impacting your current outlook on watching politics or any of it?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I definitely had people comment to me after that happened, and then certainly after the questions around like Biden and his age and can he serve. People were like, "Oh, did you feel like you predicted it with your book?" And it's like, no. And with the pandemic too. I mean, because I wrote the book and I started the book in 2018, and then everyone's like, and then oh my God, it came true. And I was like, it didn't come true. The boxes are not here. But I think, yeah, I mean, sort of when these parallels do happen to something that you wrote, I mean, I think it is just, I do just see it as kind of a strange coincidence. And it's probably something that a lot of authors have happen. And I'm only obviously privy to my own experience, but, I read several novels that were like pandemic novels that were written just a couple years before the actual pandemic, and they were real pandemic novels. So I'm like, my gosh, that person's now really seeing everything that they wrote on the page coming to life. But I think it's probably just something that happens if, as an author, our job, our desire is to just be really observant about the world and really curious about the world. And so hopefully if you're doing an okay job of that, then sometimes the things that you write might end up actually happening.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, even though I know you have many more questions, Taryn Gillum will get me if I don't stop. Let's have a round of applause for Nikki Erlick.
And thank you to Monica for coming
You're
here
welcome.
and moderating this.